Welcome to the Soul Story Show, where real conversations and soulful stories help you live and write your next chapter. I'm your host, Brooke-Sidney Harbour, and today's episode is one that touches the heart and celebrates the power of sisterhood, storytelling, and legacy. Our guest is the phenomenal Bridgett M. acclaimed author, journalist, filmmaker, and professor. You may know her from her memoir, The World According to Fannie Davis, but today we're exploring her latest and most intimate work, Love, Rita, an American story of sisterhood, joy, loss, and legacy. This book is a deeply moving tribute to Bridgett's late sister, Rita, a woman who lived boldly, loved deeply, and left an indelible mark on everyone who knew her. Through personal essays, reflections, and family history, Bridgett gives voice to grief, joy, and the complicated beauty of Black womanhood. So whether you've lost someone close, are celebrating the woman in your life, or are just craving a true story that moves the soul, this conversation is for you. Welcome, Bridgett.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here and talk about this book. So let's begin with the heart of the story. Who was Rita to you, not just as your sister, but as a presence, a force, a light?
Yeah, Rita was really so influential in my life beyond being my big sister. I realized, especially once I started to write the book, that she had profound effect on me. One simple example is she told me when I was 12 years old, I know exactly where you would really fit in for college. And she introduced Spelman College to me, a place that at that age I hadn't heard of before. And she was right. That's where I went. It was perfect for me. And it was really, it's an example of someone knowing you before you know yourself.
Mhm. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, what was the moment or the series of moments that made you say, this story about Rita needs to be told, and why now?
It's funny. As your introduction points out, I did write a memoir about my mother, The World According to Fannie Davis. And it was all about my mom having this unorthodox profession. She was a numbers runner in Detroit, which means basically she ran this underground lottery for many years that Black folks call the numbers. And in that memoir, I do talk about Rita. I write about her because she was instrumental in helping my mom run the business. So I thought I was done writing memoir.
Mhm.
And then I must say, Brooke Sidney, this really unusual thing happened for me. I was honoring my sister's birthday. She would have been 65. And I just wrote her a letter because that's the thing that I had begun to do on special occasions. I would write a loved one a letter. I wrote her this letter, and I was so surprisingly upset that it dawned on me I had not finished grieving. I had not really gone through the entire process of really accepting that I had lost her. And because I'm a writer, I understood right away I really need to write about Rita. And that began the whole process for me of writing this new memoir.
So you've written fiction and memoir before, as you mentioned. How did the experience of writing Love, Rita differ emotionally and creatively from your past works, even the one about your mother?
I love that question because people might assume that one memoir is just like another, but they're completely different universes. And in my case, the book about my mom was as much about Detroit and the culture of the numbers as it was about her. I really felt I was this devoted daughter, giving you a reason to understand why I admired and loved my mom. With the book about Rita, understand that your siblings are your contemporaries. And so they are closer to age to you, and you have lived more of your life side by side. So as a result, this memoir, Love, Rita, is far, far more intimate and far more personal. And that's really what distinguishes them. Friends of mine who've read both books tell me that that this one does feel, I guess the word I hear a lot is more tender.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I say that rings very true. The structure of this book, it weaves like essays, memories, and even cultural commentary. As you said, it's intimate and it's very layered. How
Mm.
did you decide on the form this book would take?
I really believe the form dictated itself to me
Mm.
because one of the things I knew right away as I made this decision to write this book was that I wanted to use the letters that Rita had written to me over the years. The first one, when she went away to college at age 16 and I was 12, she wrote her very first letter to me. And then across the decades, we wrote to one another. And so these letters felt to me like a really great kind of roadmap of our relationship. And so I knew I wanted to really have the actual letters in the book. And so that really helped me to figure out the chronology of the book. It also helped me to really figure out just what will the tone of it be? How intimate will it be? Because now I'm sharing her letters. The other thing that happened was that I decided that this book should really be structured around my sister's personal number, which
Mm.
was 4. Now, that might sound a little odd, but again, I grew up in a household of numbers.
Right.
So numbers mean so much to our family and to me. You know, they really, in my mind, they really uh, sort of help set the tone for what matters because our personal numbers really guide us, so to speak. Rita's number being 4, and there were many things in her life that evolved around 4. She was the fourth child in the family. She was born in the fourth month. Her name has 4 letters in it. You know, there are a lot of examples. And
Oh.
so I just decided I'm going to divide this book into 4 sections to honor the 4 phases of her life. And also, sadly, my sister passed when she was 44.
Mm.
And so I then divided the book into 44 chapters. Yeah.
Wow, wow. So, wow, there's so much as like writers can take away from that. I mean, I personally speaking, I know that I write my son a letter on every birthday. He has
Yeah.
a letter. And I think that we do it obviously for memory's sake, I think, for ourselves and for the person receiving it, but to
Mhm.
think that it becomes this beautiful layered aspect of your book, and
Mhm.
then the whole numbers. Wow, I'm a numbers person too. So when you said that, that really rang true for me. I love the number 5. I have them all throughout my birthday, all throughout everything. In fact, even my phone number. So I really relate to that. So this book, in addition to it having so much meaning to you, there's again these layers that are being incorporated on every essence, even the fours. I mean, that's just beautiful. So,
Yeah.
another one of the things that really stood out is how much joy lives in this book, even in the grief. Was that intentional from the start?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you can fake joy, right? So if it
No.
didn't really exist in our lives, I don't know that I could have tried to insert it. But it really was a true experience for us. There was a lot of joy in our family, a lot of joy between my sister and me. And so I wanted to especially celebrate how much joy she had in her own life. Rita led with joy. And I thought, you know, we are not how we die. We are not the sicknesses that we have. We are not the way our lives end. We are absolutely the way we live. And so it just felt honest. It just
Mm.
felt honest to really illuminate the joy that Rita had in her life.
I love that. You were balancing a lot of different things from the structure to how the story was told. As a
Mhm.
writer, how did you balance like vulnerability and privacy, right? Especially when sharing these personal family moments or things that might be painful to revisit.
Yeah, I know that's something that memoirists struggle with a lot, how much to tell.
Right.
And I just have a belief that, well, I believe a couple things. First, you really are entitled to your own story. And so, because I'm telling this story of my relationship with Rita, I felt totally fine being as honest and as open as I needed to be to tell my story honestly. And, the other thing I think that's really important is to really honor your family members and those who might actually feel some kind of way. I'm not a writer who says it doesn't matter. Even though I
Right.
do believe you can tell your own story, I also believe it's important to honor family first. And so, if there's a way to bring your loved ones into the storytelling so they don't feel threatened or shut out or worried even about what you're going to write, then I think that hopefully, there's a way to get their help in telling the story so they feel less threatened by it. I have always called my memoirs, the two that I've written, I call them communal memoirs because other people's voices are as important as mine. For instance, with a sister, I knew her one way, but I went out and talked to her childhood friends and her buddy from grad school and her former lovers, and the people she worked with, because all of them helped to tell the story of who Rita was. So, yeah, I'm very much dedicated to that form of memoir writing. And then I'll finally just add that if you're not going to be really honest and vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
right, and go there and
Right.
really reveal truths that you have come to understand about yourself, as well as this person you're writing about, then why write the memoir?
That's
I
true.
think readers can tell when you're not being truly open or honest, right?
Right. I think you're definitely right, and it's so responsible. I feel like in telling her story, I mean, you have one point of view as a sister, but being able to go out and get all those other different points of view and also be able to help them share their story about her, I just find that incredibly beautiful. So, Rita's story is both singular and universal, especially for Black women navigating care, career, and community. What parts of
Mhm.
her life do you think will resonate most with Black women readers in particular?
I really love that question. I really hope and believe that Black women will read this story and really appreciate the role that friendship plays in Black women's lives, especially for women like my sister who never married and didn't have children. And that is not so rare when it comes to Black women. And so I hope they'll appreciate seeing someone whose life is similar to theirs in those ways, who still had a full life and who really treasured and honored and respected and nourished her relationships with other women. I'm thinking that that'll be something that will resonate. And also, many Black women are struggling with chronic illness, various forms of chronic diseases. And so, in Rita's case, it was lupus, an autoimmune disease, which disproportionately affects Black women and which millions of Black women are suffering from, some form of an autoimmune disease. So I want women to see themselves in that way too. Those struggles that Rita went through, I'm very open about her challenges, but also the ways that she rose above and she persevered and she was determined to still do all of these amazing things in her life. I think that's unique to my sister and also universal to the ways in which Black women really push through, you know?
No, I love that. So that there's different representations of Black women in books, in life, because there's no like monolithic Black womanhood, or this is what a Black woman's life is like. So the more representations we can have, the better. And I feel like who better to tell their story than you? So you
Thank
wrote also about beauty, I feel like illness, resilience, and even rage, all through
you.
Rita's lens. How do you hope this story challenges or expands narratives around Black women's emotional lives?
Yeah, I am a firm believer that Black women deserve to have the gamut of emotions and not be labeled angry Black women, for instance. And I do believe that Rita is a great example of that because you know from reading this book what she cares about,
Mhm.
what pisses her off, what she's adamant about, where she will compromise, where she won't. It's important because what I'm describing is simply Black humanity. And it's so often that we don't get to see that complex, really textured aspect of Black life, where, especially with Black women, that's just my
Mhm.
belief. We don't see enough of that kind of portrayal. And so it was really important to me to do that, as well as to talk about what it means to be struggling with a chronic illness that can sometimes lead to depression. You know,
Right.
my sister was on an antidepressant because her rheumatologist, her specialist, knew that given the sort of challenges of dealing daily with this chronic illness, it was definitely going to affect her mood. And so my sister passed in 2000. So 25 years ago, people weren't talking about mental health the way they are now. And I thought it was really bold of her to say, yeah, I am definitely under the care of a therapist, and I am taking medication to help me through what is a really challenging way to live, you know. It was like she understood what she needed for herself and she was embracing self-care.
It's true. She was embracing her truth, and
Mhm.
honestly the truth of so many people that are living with chronic illness. Most chronic illness, if you know that this is something you contend with daily, it's a hard thing to live with, right? And to work through. So I love you beautifully shared that, and I think it's a great kind of role model, as well as breaking down these rigid cast of like the angry Black woman, as you mentioned, or any other, I think, long gone just minimalization of how Black women feel and think. So I think this is beautiful. There's a thread also of culture and cultural legacy and Black sisterhood throughout the book. What did you discover or even rediscover about your own identity while writing this book?
Oh, I've never been asked that question. It's a great question. I certainly realized, maybe it was obvious, but it wasn't to me, how much she had influenced me. I knew we were close. I knew I adored her. She was my big sister, but I hadn't really understood her sort of pervasive influence in my life until I really sat down to write the story, you know, about her. So that's one thing. And now I think, too, I'll be honest, what I came to understand was, not only had I not really fully processed losing her, but I had been feeling some guilt. And I'm not sure I admitted that to myself before. I didn't want to see myself as someone who carried guilt and felt bad about what I hadn't done. I didn't want to be that person. But in writing the book, I had to come to terms with that. Oh, this is guilt. This is guilt I felt because I couldn't save her. And
Mm,
then, thank God that writing does this. It helped me to see that I didn't need to feel guilty. That, in fact, because she died from lupus does not mean that I could have saved her, you know?
right. Right.
And all of that came through in the writing.
The writing was so healing. Um, Before we turn to that, I want to touch on one last thing that I think is so important is you talk about, and the story shows the strength and sacredness of Black women's friendships. I know you mentioned this a little bit in before, but I feel like it's really important now when so many people, not just Black women, but so many people are feeling isolated and alone and lacking friendship and the importance of friendship and connection. So, what role did those friendships really play in Rita's life and even in your own healing?
Rita's friends were so important to her. I talk about this number four. She had four really good friends, and they were friends from every aspect of her life. What I really came to see and understand is that each of those women thought that Rita was her best friend. She was a great friend.
I love that.
And also, each friend provided a different kind of emotional support to her, so that she got different things from each friend. So that maybe one friend was someone she talked to every day on the phone, and they talked about the news, and they debated, and they discussed what had happened at work. That was that friend. Another friend might have been there for her. Maybe they didn't talk as often, but she knew that friend could really understand her health struggles, and she didn't have to explain. She
Mm,
didn't have to make excuses. That friend was going to be there for her like that. So she had these different friends in her life that sort of rounded out her experience. And I thought I learned a lot from that. I was never someone with a lot of friends, but watching how she had these relationships with her friends really influenced me. And in fact, there was a point at which I was upset with a childhood friend of mine. We had been friends since we were in the fourth grade, and now we're in high school. And she told my sister that my boyfriend at the time had done something in front of her that she didn't like. And
okay.
I didn't want anyone to know, right? And
Mm,
so I said to my sister, I'm not speaking to her again. And Rita said to me, "You listen to me." She was harsh. "You listen to me. That is your best friend because she cares about you. And whatever you do in life, don't lose that friend." And we're still friends today.
wow. That's so beautiful. I know for me during reading the book, it made me kind of also look at the friendships that have been seasonal and so far a lifetime. I mean, I'm still here, but it also made me think about their different value, I think, that each person brings. And it also made me reach out and just appreciate and just tell my friends, thank you. Like, just thank you for being in my life. And so I think that the women readers of this book, anyone really that reads the book that sees the value of sisterhood. I don't have real sisters. I don't have, so my friends are my sisters. And so it just really made me want to appreciate them more, love on them more, and value that friendship. So know that this book does that.
I
Um,
love hearing that. I love hearing that.
it's very much so. So I want to turn a little bit to the writing process and maybe some of the lessons that were learned, especially because we have so many people that want to write a book. What was the hardest chapter to write and why?
The hardest chapter for me to write was the penultimate chapter. So I told you I broke it into 44 chapters.
Mhm.
The 43rd chapter is the one in which my sister passes, where I had to
Mhm.
go through the whole story, retelling it to myself and remembering and recalling that really one of the worst periods of my life when her health devolved very quickly, and there was that terrible phone call that I received from the doctor telling me, you know, that she hadn't made it. So let me tell you, I worked on that, or I avoided writing it for, for a while because I knew I needed to be a little clear eyed, if you know what I mean, and really provide all the details so that the reader understood, what I was going through, the challenge Rita faced, what I was grappling with, and really what was causing so much like pain and grief for me. And I knew I couldn't do it in a sort of shortened way. I had to just go there. So I did, but boy, it was a hard one. It was a hard one.
Yeah, I can imagine having to live it all over again and make sure that you're, telling it truthfully as you mentioned before. You wrote so beautifully about grief, not just one loss, but many. Can we talk about cumulative grief? Like, how do you
Mhm.
carry it, and how did writing this book help you make sense of it?
For so long, I didn't know, or I didn't think I knew anyone who dealt with cumulative grief. I mean, I can smile about this now, but I used to look at the Kennedys, which seemed to
Mhm.
me the one example of a family that I knew about that had dealt with so much loss back to back, multiple losses. And so I and my sister Rita and I both used to share this. We felt like freaks. We were like, why is our family suffering so much? And so I think now it's because the culture doesn't really talk about it. And I have come to understand, in part from writing the book, but just in the recent years of being more open about my own family losses, that many people have cumulative grief, that it means many things to many people. Cumulative grief can, of course, literally mean, you know, having loved ones die back to back. But it also is like so many kinds of losses that cause grief, that people feel they have no break. One, it feels like one after the other. And so I'm grateful that I was able to finally get the courage and then also the opportunity, the platform to really explore my one experience with cumulative grief as a way to really provide an opportunity for others to see themselves and to just shed light on it so that someone else doesn't walk around feeling as I once did, like they're freakish, for having this experience that they think others haven't had.
I think that you're so right when you're saying our culture or society really doesn't talk about grief. We really don't talk much about death. So, what did writing teach you about mourning and memory and or even healing?
Mm. You know, Writing this book especially, this is my fourth book. Two of them were novels, and this is the second memoir. But this book in particular has taught me so much about what mourning is. Mourning is not a finite experience. Mourning, as I learned, could go on for 20 years under the surface, just right there beneath your, veneer of being okay. And so it really helped me to appreciate that I need to honor those feelings and also to allow myself to heal. I think that that is the other side of mourning. I came to understand that I hadn't given myself permission to admit the mourning and the grief, but also to move on as if I didn't deserve that.
That's
It's
beautiful.
strange what grief does, right? It can create strange kinds of survivor's guilt.
Yeah, it's so multi-layered. And it's so
Mm.
brave of you to even take on this challenge. So, what do you hope like readers do with this book beyond reading it? Like, what conversations do you hope it sparks?
Well, I've been really fortunate that I have had the opportunity as I've been out here promoting the book and on book tour. I've had a couple of really, really wonderful events in collaboration with lupus organizations
Yeah.
or Black women who have begun their own organizations, their own, like just groups to talk about the specific issues that you face when you're a woman of color dealing with a chronic illness like this. These were groups and organizations that didn't exist in my sister's time. And so it means a lot to me to be able to have these events and have these discussions and to hear how these women, yes, they see themselves in Rita in the book, but also they are able to talk about the ways they are dealing in 2025 with this disease, with this kind of disease. It was really, I hope I'm using the right word, it was really inspiring to me to see the evolution, to see how these young women are self actualizing and treating this as a way to self care and to really, share with others what this is about. I know Rita, at times, I felt like she suffered in silence. People just didn't understand lupus. And so they in some ways diminished the challenges she was facing. And these young women today who are lupus, warriors, as they call themselves, they're not having it. They are bold. They're talking about what they need. They're like, look, if I need time off from work, that's what I'm going to do. So already the book has helped me in that way in expanding my community of folks. And it's also hopefully just creating more conversation and dialogue around all of these issues, not just, you know, dealing with lupus, but issues of dealing with, look, I talk a lot in the book about systemic racism and its impact on our lives and our health. I want people to be more able to find the language, for instance, to talk about that impact. Because again, it's like we suffer in silence,
That's
you
right.
know?
That's true, and I feel like there'll be more, even especially from what you're saying, more advocacy for Black women, the issues and the causes, but also more self-advocacy for women starting to speak up for their needs, what they want, and what's happening so that they're not silent. Many
Yes.
of our listeners are aspiring authors, especially
Mhm.
memoirists, who want to tell their own soul stories. What advice would you give to someone writing a memoir that's deeply personal, and what help you take this story from manuscript to published book?
Yeah, I would say a few things. First, I would say that it's important to honor your desire to tell the story. That's important because sometimes people think because it's personal, maybe it's not that important, or maybe it doesn't have, universal significance. I would say if your heart is moving you to tell this story, then it needs to be told because you need to write it and something is moving you to do it. So I would first say just honor that desire to tell the story and then really appreciate that each book takes the time that it takes. There's no, in my mind, no arbitrary deadline for writing a book. My first memoir about my mom took from the beginning to the end, everything included to publication, 9 years. Yeah. This book
Wow.
was quicker. This book was quicker. It took 4 years. But also, I had learned a lot, right?
Right.
And I had a track record. There were things that made this book, and believe me, 4 years is quick.
It is. It is. You're right. In the publishing world, it is, and I think people think that that everything should happen instantly. And so I love that you're sharing the truth that good storytelling takes time, even for
Mhm,
ourselves to let the story that I feel like God or whatever it is for the other people, higher power that's giving us to
mhm.
percolate, marinate, and then kind of come forward. And I really believe that it helps us heal. And I feel like that's another thing that your book shows us very powerfully.
Yeah, and I would just add to that that sometimes you're not ready to write the book. We don't talk about that enough
Right.
either. That maybe it's not the time. And that
Mm.
doesn't mean that you can't work on it in your way. For
Right.
instance, with the book about my mom, I had to get up my courage to write that
Mhm.
book. And so for a while, I devoted my time to interviewing people about her. And that wasn't really writing the book, but it was working on it. But it was
That's right.
really working up my courage.
That's right.
And so every time I recorded an interview, just to go back and listen to it and transcribe it was a way of entering that world, giving myself baby steps into the process. It's not a matter of just sitting down one day, opening your laptop and typing away, No, it's a process. And I say to my students all the time, honor your own process.
That's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. Perfectly said. So now I want to transition to kind of like our rapid fire round or soul notes. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I'd love for you just to share whatever comes to your mind first. So, what's a book you've gifted the most besides your own?
Sarah Broom's The Yellow House.
Ooh.
Yeah, I
Ooh.
love that book.
Why do you love that book?
It is a memoir, but it's also a gorgeous, unknown history of New Orleans. It's doing both at the same time, and the writing is just magnificent.
Okay. If your soul had a soundtrack, what's one song that would be on it?
I'm Every Woman.
Ooh, yes,
Chaka
Shaka Khan.
Khan.
That's right. That's right. One word to describe your sister Rita, and I know it's hard to just give one word, but
Fabulous.
yeah, she definitely lives that word. A quote or affirmation that's been guiding you lately.
We are bodies born of other bodies.
Ooh, wow. That is very powerful.
Yeah.
If you could leave every reader with just one sentence from Love Rita, what would it be?
I think it would be the last sentence. As Rita would say, that's a win win.
Ooh, so beautiful. Well, Bridgett, thank you for sharing your heart, your words, and your sister's legacy with us. Love Rita is a love letter to sisterhood, to Black womanhood, and to the power of telling our stories, even the ones that are soaked in loss. This conversation reminds us that remembrance is resistance and joy is an act of survival. To our listeners, Love Rita is available now wherever books are sold. And trust me, you'll want to gift a copy to every woman who's held space for you, made you laugh, or reminded you of who you truly are. You can learn more about Bridget's work at bridgetdavis.com and be sure to follow her on social media for updates on her books, talks, and even film work. And if you love today's soulful conversations, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. And share this episode with someone who needs a reminder that love leaves a legacy and our stories are sacred. I'm Brooke-Sidney Harbour, and this is the Soul Story Show, where real conversations and soulful stories help you live and write your next chapter. Until next time.